Hey guys, I'm Brent Hall with Lifebenders Visuals, and welcome to another episode of Photography Tutorials. Today's episode we're going to be focusing on sharpening techniques, and the one that I'm going to do here in this example is going to be selective sharpening using the Smart filter, the Smart Sharpen filter. And I prefer this method. There's a ton of different methods you can use. And for these type of applications, like I have here with a birding subject or a wildlife subject, I prefer this method because it's easy, it's not too complicated, it's not like a high pass thing, and it gives you very good control over only the areas that you want to be sharpened. Because if we start sharpening all this stuff here in the background, it's going to introduce noise and it's going to introduce distraction and take you away from your subject, all things that we don't want. So let's start off here by, I'm going to delete this stuff so we can start from scratch here. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to create, you never want to do anything on your base layer, so we want to create a new copy of this, and we can do that by hitting Control J, or you can go up to and do it in the menus there, but I like the shortcuts. So Control J for a copy of the background layer there. Now what we want to do is we want to turn this into a smart object. So we're going to right click on here and hit Convert to Smart Object. And that's going to take a second. And once that gets converted, now you're going to see right here, you're going to see that little icon in the bottom right corner of the new copy, and that lets you know when you hover over it that that's a smart object. So now what we can do is come up here and grab the filter. We're going to go to Sharpen and Smart Sharpen. So here's a little dialog box you get when you get a Smart Sharpen, and you get a preview here. So come over and find your subject, and in this case, with wildlife and stuff like that, we want to focus on their eyes, especially if they're looking at us and we have good lighting and all that stuff. We really want to accentuate these eyes. So we have a few sliders here. I kind of generally, you're just going to have to piddle with it. You know, it depends on your lighting condition, on the noise, the ISO level of each image, but you know, there's definitely a general rule of thumb. You can start to see, you start out with 0 for the amount, and if you push it just really hard, you will start seeing the effects, and you bring up this radius, and that obviously is horrid. So we want to back that down. So the radius is, you know, I like to keep it kind of low, and usually low 1s or so. And again, use this as your tool to see if you've pushed it too far. 400% is obviously way too far. Our intention here is not to let people know that we have sharpened it. It's just to make it as subtly good as we can as possible. So I like to keep it a little bit lower. Close to 200% usually is where I like it. Again, it depends on the subject. Now you have a couple of different methods for this here. You've got Gaussian, lens blur, and motion blur, and I typically will use lens blur for this kind of thing. Sometimes you can use motion blur if you've really got that a little bit of hand shakiness going on from, you know, maybe a slow shutter speed, or if it was really windy outside, but here there's none of that. So lens blur is usually where I want to keep it. We've got our settings here. Now all you have to do is when your hand hovers over this area, if you just click and hold, you'll see the original, and you let go and you'll see the preview. So you can do that, and again, it's just real subtle, it's not overdone, it's exactly how we want it. So we click OK. So now, instead of, if we didn't convert this to a smart object, it would have just applied it to this layer, and we couldn't have done anything about it. We couldn't have gone and changed it, and nothing. But now we can see here, if we zoom in, yeah, I know, go away. That's not what I want. So we can zoom in, and so we've done this globally, and you can tell because we have this mask and it's all white, meaning that the filter has applied to the whole image. So we have the area that we want, and the eye and the beak and all of that is looking wonderful. But look over here, look in this section. Now you can see in this bokeh here, in this out of focus area where the leaf is and this dark stuff, it has introduced a lot of noise that we don't want. So we don't want that sharpened. So that's the whole reason we convert this to a smart copy, to a smart object, and then now we have this mask with a filter down here. So what we do is click on the mask, and we're going to do Control I to invert that. So now the mask being black has covered everything up. So now we're going to grab our brush tool, we're going to hit the B button as a shortcut for brush, and we're going to make sure that we're painting with white, and then we're going to go in here and we're going to paint in the areas that we want. So it's very subtle. I don't want this whole bird to be sharpened because in this particular bird you have, these blacks here are introducing noise and stuff like that. So we just want to look at certain areas of the bird that we want to focus on. The feet here, because those stand out quite nicely, and a little bit of the edge of the wings, maybe where you have contrast is really, where people are going to be focusing. So the rest of this stuff, when we zoom out, like I'm zoomed into 100% right now, so you can really, you think it's overkill at 100%, but when we zoom out here, Control-0 for zooming out. So now I have sharpened only the areas that I want, and if you turn it on and off here, you can see that's before and that's after. Again, it's very subtle. Even on the screen, it's very hard to tell, but when you zoom in, there's a big difference. That's how it is now, before and after. And again, I didn't do any of this other stuff here in the middle of the bird because that's not something we want to focus on. It's just going to introduce more noise, and sharpening is one of the ways people tend to go overkill. And so we just want something very subtle, and it's just going to make this bird pop just a little bit more. So there's one other thing that I want to talk about here, because if you notice, what I had to do was make a layer copy of that. So what happens if, like on most of your images, if you want to do something else, because typically you need to do sharpening last. And so if you have other things that you want to do in an image, you can come up here and let's say, I want to paint in, I want to just build up this contrast a little bit, and do some stuff here. Well, the problem is now I'm doing this over an image that's already been sharpened, so it might not look as great. So what I want to do is we want to delete that, and we want to, well, you don't have to delete it, undo that. So we'll put it underneath the, no, we're going to go ahead and delete it, because so what we're going to do now is, now that I've showed you the sharpening, I'm going to show you another trick here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of other little tweaks here. So I'm just going to kind of accentuate the, I don't want it 100%, I want it somewhere around here. So I'm just going to accentuate this, and we're just going to, just little adjustments here to really make this bird pop. And we don't want to go too crazy on it, because this is just for an example's sake. So we have some little adjustments there for some contrast, and I'm gonna do maybe a little bit of saturation boost, but I don't want the background saturated. I just want to accentuate this bird and the red plumage here, and maybe his eye. Okay. So yeah, we just have a little bit of adjustments. So for the sake of example, we have just a few adjustments here, and now we want to sharpen. So what do we do? If we create a new layer and hit Control J, like, whoops, if we go back to the background, because we want the background we have to select that, well then that's going to do what I said is no good. We don't want this here. If we drag this above that, it's going to negate everything we just did because you can't see through this. This is a background copy. So we want to delete that. So what we have here is we have our layers. We want to make sure that we're selected on the top layer here, and we're going to do a stamp visible layer. So what that's going to do is that's going to take everything that we've done and create a new layer so that it doesn't block out anything that we've done. And to do that, the shortcut is Control, Shift, Alt, and E. That's kind of a lot, but it's super easy once you get it. So again, that's Control, Shift, Alt, E, and that will make you a stamp visible layer. So now if I turn these layers off, and it will see that it recorded this information in our layers there. So now we have this. Now we can go ahead and do the convert to smart object of this layer, assuming this is the last thing that we want to do. This image, in this case it is, so now it's a smart object. I'm going to go up here to filter again and smart sharpen, and it'll keep the settings that you had previously, so I know that that's where I want it. I'm going to go here, make sure you select it on that Smart Sharpen filter, Control I to invert it, and B for your brush tool. And I'm going to change my opacity up to 100% again. And we're just going to paint in, repaint in those areas. Make sure we get the feet. All right, there you have it. So now we have the Smart Sharpen filter, and we have effectively done our selective sharpening so that none of this other background here gets messed with. And the bird is looking fantastic, and that's all there is to it. It's super simple. Like I said, if you don't need to do any adjustments and you've done everything else in Camera Raw or in Lightroom, then you just bring it in here and you do it like we did in the beginning and make that initial background copy. If you've got adjustments still, then you just do those first. You come up here and do your stamp visible layer, and then apply that as a filter, that sharpen as a filter with a mask here, and that's all there is to it. So I hope this helps. It is a wonderful technique to just add just a little bit more of a detail, especially if you're focusing or whatnot is not right on. This can really save an image, and it can really make it pop, and it's super easy to do. So if you like that, let me know if you have any other questions or comments in the section below, and make sure to subscribe, and I will have some more of these up regularly. Thanks.